All right. Well, welcome everybody. I am very excited to be having this conversation with Dr. Gary Onik. He has been in the world of oncology and medical research for, we were just talking, for 40 years now this year. He is a researcher at heart and an inventor, but also has his own pretty incredible story with cancer himself. He has earned himself the nickname of Dr. Hope, and there's a pretty great documentary that's worth watching around his work and his life. He is currently the Chief Medical Officer at ImmuneSys Incorporated and is an adjunct professor at Carnegie Mellon. So, Dr. Gary, thank you so much for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
So what I'd like to do is have a conversation. In future videos, we'll talk through your personal cancer story and then maybe some advice that you have for cancer fighters out there. But first, I really want to just dive into the medical research side of things and invention side of things, because that's where you do have this 40-year, pretty incredible history of really pioneering in the space of treating cancer in some really radical ways. So take us back to kind of the start of your career. So you said it was 1982. What got you into this space of cancer treatment specifically?
Well, it was 1982, and I was a resident in radiology at the University of California, San Francisco. And one day I was doing a CT-guided biopsy. Now, CT-guided biopsies are done a million times every year now. But back then it was, we had the first CT scanner.
Oh, interesting.
By General Electric, and it took an hour to get a scan. Now it takes about 5 seconds. And so we were doing a CT-guided biopsy on a liver tumor, and it occurred to me all of a sudden, if I could target that and somehow destroy it, and leave it in, and the body can resorb the tumor, we may have a major advantage, because many, many patients with liver tumors and with other tumors as well, but this was my first focus, they have no hope because the tumor can't be cut out, can't be what we call resected. And so if it can't be resected, traditionally those patients were incurable. And so therapy was palliative, and so all of a sudden I said, well, if I could kill that tumor some other way, then maybe we could cure some of these patients.
Yeah.
So I started on my own time looking at possible ways to kill these tumors. And I looked at alcohol, and I looked at heat lesions, and I had a lot of limitations because the technologies that later came around to heat tumors and do those things, they weren't around. So I had these very crude, limited tools, and the only tool that could destroy a significant amount of tissue at that point was freezing, because there were cryo probes that had been built for other things, and so I started freezing stuff. And since I was a radiologist, the key was, could I see it? Because the CT was going to allow me to guide it in exactly where I wanted to go, or some other imaging, maybe ultrasound. And could I see the effect of it? Because that was the critical thing. I needed to know, how much am I doing? Am I doing it properly? And all that stuff. So I got a piece of liver and I dripped liquid nitrogen on it because I didn't even have cryoprobes back then. And at that point, and I ultrasounded the liver, and sure enough, you could see everything. And one of my colleagues said, "You know who would be interested in this? A fellow by the name of Boris Rubinsky." And Boris was an assistant professor of mechanical engineering at UC Berkeley at the time, and I called up Boris, and Boris said, "This is what we've needed. The imaging. This is going to change everything." And because he had been in the cryosurgical side, freezing was his thing, cryopreservation at that point mostly, and so we started a collaboration, and we are still collaborating 40 years later.
Wow.
We are still working on projects, 40 years later. But that really... It's
quite the partnership.
Yes. And that really started it. Not like any good marriage, we've fought tooth and nail at times.
Sure.
Nothing gets done easily, particularly creative endeavors. I was very lucky, if I can digress just a little bit. Boris is this overwhelming intellect. I mean, he is just an absolute genius. And, working with Boris, you could begin to wonder, is there any of me in this?
Sure.
Or is
he just guiding me along? Yeah.
Is all this Boris, And so
is he humoring me?
Yeah. So luckily, at the same time, I had another project that had nothing to do with freezing. It had to do with treating herniated lumbar discs minimally invasively with something that I invented called the nucleotome. And that was massively successful. And so I could at least sit down and say, this is a good partnership because I bring something to this as well. Some creativity that, from my end, that's important to the project, really. So that's the way it started. And
so when did you treat your first patient with this cryo ablation, if that's what you call it?
Yeah, well,
cryosurgical ablation.
I went off to I finished my residency. Now they let me.
This is all theory at this point, right?
This is all theory.
This is theory testing with non-live tissue.
We did live tissue and saw characterized on all of the visual aspects of this. And then I went. My mom actually was diagnosed with breast cancer at that time. And I was on the West Coast. She was on the East Coast. And I said, I'd really like to be closer since, her diagnosis. And so I had a fellowship all lined up in San Francisco in interventional radiology. And I was able to get a fellowship in CT and ultrasound at the time at Deaconess Hospital at Harvard. And that's associated with the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. And they had an incredible program in liver tumors and liver resections. And they were very welcoming. And we started doing the first patients there.
You're like, hey, let's start freezing some stuff. I have some ideas. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because I was this young kid. And I was standing toe to toe with the greatest liver surgeons in the world.
Wow.
And it was quite intimidating at times. But there's one story that we were doing a patient, and they were resecting this tumor, and they had kind of missed the resection and there was a little residual tumor there. And the surgeon said, "Can we freeze that?" And I said, "Yeah, we could." And he said, "Well, what does the literature say about doing that?" And I said, "Dr. Katie, we are the literature."
Yeah. We have to write it still.
Yeah, we have to write it, and then we'll know.
Yeah.
And so we started there, and I, because I was doing neurosurgical things at the time, and Harvard wasn't the right place for me to be doing that as well. I was recruited to be in a neurosurgery department in Allegheny General Hospital in Pittsburgh. And so I left there, and Harvard went great guns and kept developing the program. And I developed my own liver program there, and liver cryosurgery program where we were treating patients. And so that's how that started. And then we and it was clear that after a short period of time that we could create patients who were disease-free.
Yeah.
Who were unresectable, they couldn't have the tumors cut out, and we could kill them, and now they were disease-free. And the question was, is there going to be anybody who lasts long-term that way?
Right,
because
yeah.
In most of these cases, we were dealing with patients with metastatic disease. And if you got metastatic disease, as you know, it can pop up someplace else at another time, unfortunately. But what was interesting was that some of our patients, even though you were killing 4, 5, 6, 7 tumors, were not getting metastatic disease after that. And that raised the issue, because there was a work being done long ago where they showed that if you freeze something, some patients actually will have all their tumors go away because of their immune system once it was frozen. And it wasn't a reproducible phenomenon, but it showed that there was something going on. And so it was obvious that there's something going on here. Can we harness it somehow? And only took 35 years to figure it out.
Well, there you go. Yeah,
there you go.
That's good. That's in a lifetime.
And then
pretty good work.
I'd like to just say a little bit about the other things that ended up coming from it, because patients should know about them.
Absolutely.
So we went on to, from the liver, we went on to the prostate, and we did prostate cryoablation, and that is a standard treatment now, very underutilized, but it's a standard treatment. And early on, back, it was almost 20 years ago, a patient came to me and said, "Well, why do you have to freeze my whole gland if I only have this tumor right here?" And I said, "Well, because." Like any good parent.
So we haven't tried anything else.
Yes, because nobody's tried anything else. And so he raised the issue to me, and I started looking in the literature, and sure enough, there was about 60% of prostate tumors would be amenable to what we would call a focal approach, where you don't have to kill the whole gland. And so I offered that to him, and we did him, and I did 7 more patients like that, and then I published the results. And you would have thought that I committed some heinous crime. Literally,
you got on some people's lists, huh?
Yes, the backlash on that was tremendous, just unbelievable. And fast forward 20 years later, every major cancer program has a focal therapy program. They're behind the curve in that it turns out that focal therapy is mainly used for the patients with not so serious cancer. But the people who really need it the most are the patients with the most serious cancer, because
Right.
it turns out we're getting much, much better results on them than surgery can get. So,
That's fascinating.
that'll take another 5 years before they catch up on that.
They catch up.
But but with the immunotherapy, because part of the reason I think we're getting those better results is because we're getting an immunologic reaction in patients, and we're preventing them from getting metastatic disease.
So is your work, in your opinion, recognized as the foundation of that, or is it more like each institution is saying, well, we kind of came up with this?
Yeah, no,
they want to admit that they got it wrong.
Yeah, no, there are maybe 4 or 5 people in the country who know that I was the person who started, and even the
and
focal
that initial
therapy,
paper.
Yeah, even the focal therapy went, and I was not recognized. But I had a very important experience, and I had a political thing happen, and it turns out that I had to leave Allegheny General Hospital, and I came down to Florida, and I basically had lost. I mean, I was one of the hottest tickets around. I was curing liver cancer. I was traveling the world doing percutaneous cystectomies and talking all over the world. And literally overnight in the cancer world, my world was gone. I was untouchable because I had made a break with the company that controlled the technology. And so their way of dealing with it was, okay, well, you'll be able to use the technology because we have to let you do that, but you're not going to speak anywhere. You're not going to, we're not going to. And I was also separated from my data. So I had to leave it at the hospital that I was leaving. So now I had no way of doing any research either. So that can make you very bitter.
Sure. I can imagine.
And I was bitter, and I was running around trying to reproduce the situation I had previously. And I was speaking to a colleague of mine at a meeting, and he had invented something very profound. He had discovered PSA. And but he was basic science researcher, and the guy who got the credit for it was the guy who first used it clinically.
Got it.
So every time you met him, he would complain to you about how he's not getting any credit, and all of a sudden I had this epiphany. I said, "That's me." Is it
you saw yourself in the mirror?
Yeah. Is it really important for anyone to know that I was the person who did it? No. It's the only thing that's important is that I know I did it, and that I keep doing it, despite the fact that you know that you're not playing in your sandbox. You're playing in other people's sandboxes. You're playing in surgical sandboxes, and you're not a surgeon. So this is what's going to happen to you. And so instantly, I felt all of my resentment go away. And for the first time, and I realized that it didn't matter. And money didn't matter either. That wasn't a way to keep score. Sure. And I realize now that was, kind of the first divine moment where I was given some important knowledge, which was going to be critical as we went forward, in the other important things we were doing. So it
was a very pivotal moment for you.
Pivotal moment. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. So after focal therapy, what was next? Kind of where did you focus next?
Well, what happened was that we had Boris had an idea, and the idea was that cryosurgery destroys tissues and can break down kind of collagen networks. So let's say if you freeze bowel, you're going to get a hole in it. Right? It limits you. Any tube that you freeze is going to get a hole in it, except a vessel, because vessels protect themselves because they're hot. Right? And so Boris had this brilliant idea, and he said, there's this thing called electroporation. And you apply an electric current, and it punches holes in the cell or opens holes in the cell membrane. And then you can put things in like genes and stuff like that. And then they close up. And now you've gotten stuff into a cell. Transfection, it's called.
Yeah. Okay.
And, but everybody was working on, okay, how do we keep these cells alive? Because we don't want to kill them.
Sure.
And Boris said, let's use that. Let's optimize it so we actually kill them.
Yeah. So say if it's the right cells, you want to kill them.
Yeah, and consistently.
Yeah.
So he brought the idea to me, and we hooked up with another brilliant guy by the name of Paul Mikas. And three of us started working on this project, and we developed what was called irreversible electroporation, or IRE. And irreversible electroporation, now called the nano knife, has made a major impact. It's allowed pancreatic surgeons to destroy tumors that are unresectable in the pancreas.
Yeah.
So pancreatic cancer, and it's been shown to double survival times in pancreatic cancer. And so
that's amazing.
Yeah. So this is a major advancement and departure from what was available, and now we're applying it to all sorts of other areas, of course. Anything that's unresectable and in a difficult location, you can now use IRE to get the benefit of tumor ablation, which is where we started back 40 years ago.
Yeah.
It was just, you develop new tools to get it going. And that is where kind of the focal ablation aspects and it's all these ramifications kind of ended for me. And we took on other projects, but I had a nice 4-year hiatus in this. And after we finished the IRE project and we got it through, I decided that I was going to go and spend some time, with the family, and particularly my son Al, who is a high-functioning autistic kid. And we went to boat mechanics school together, and we finished building a sailboat, and we sailed off. And,
awesome! I love this story.
Yeah, we came back we came back 4 years later, and once again, God works in mysterious ways. I said, I'm going to go and I'm just going to do academic medicine because you don't know. And I said this in the video. You don't know. You can't see that you're going to have another hit. It's like, are you a one-hit wonder? Well, I'm not a one-hit wonder. I've had lots of hits. But after the next one, it's a creative endeavor. Are you going to have another hit? Right. And I thought, probably not. I mean, there'll be other variations, but nothing really big. And so I was going to go back and just go back into academic medicine, and nobody wanted me.
Okay.
It's like, well, you give a party and nobody shows up.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure.
And
That's a closed door.
and that's exactly what happened to me. Nobody wanted me. And so I had to go off on my own again. And as it turns out, that's what was meant to happen.
That's what was supposed to happen.
Ultimately, the next major advance I never would have been able to do if I was in an academic center. Yeah.
And so timeline-wise, we're talking just now a few years ago, right? What's the time frame of you making that move?
That was about 7 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. About 7 years ago.
Just orienting people that we're coming up closer to current state.
Exactly. And so that's that brings us to the other story, basically.
Got it. All right. So let's pause there then, because that's perfect. I'm very excited to get into that story. But for now, Dr. Onik, thank you very much for spending this time with us. We will link below to your website and to information if anyone has just questions and wants to learn more about the work that you've been doing. So that'll be below in the description.